Okay, we got to talk about crime. Crime in Korea is almost non-existent. In fact, one of the biggest sources of crime, and this really embarrasses me, is us. It's foreigners, particularly Americans. Us fighting police officers, us getting really drunk at bars and smashing up, bottles and, picking fights with people. I've seen it. I don't like it, and honestly, it makes me embarrassed because we're guests in a foreign country. Crime here is almost non-existent to the point where a lot of women can walk the streets alone at night. And I've made a lot of Korean friends, and some of them I have to explain like that is not the norm in most parts of the world. Korea has something very special, and it needs to be protected. Against foreigners like myself, we're us foreigners are the reasons that crime goes up in certain areas, and it's on us to change that. And it's also on Korea to protect that. I'll never forget just seeing Koreans leave phones and wallets out on a table just to reserve it. You walk into a coffee shop, you set your phone or your laptop or your iPhone down on the table, you go ahead and order coffee and you sit down. That simple act would just not be, I think, possible in the United States outside of small communities because it's one. Honestly, it's a bigger country with more people and more variables, but also culture. I think the more I grow older, the more I realize that more than laws, culture is so much more important in running a community or a society. Um, you know, the Koreans, act this way not because the laws tell them to do so. It's because it's just their culture, basic respect and morality. Morality is baked into cultures as well. There are some cultures where they're not moral cultures, as far as cultures can be morally bad. Thievery, stealing, crime is very high in certain communities. And they're the reasons that, for example, in the United States, you can't leave your phone or wallet out. Whereas in Korea, they you'll ask them like, why didn't you do X? Because it's the wrong thing to do. If for example there are bus lanes on the highway in Korea, right, and the entire freeway, the entire highway will be blocked with traffic, and yet still people won't go on the bus lanes to cut the line. When they could save hours of time by doing it, but they leave that to the buses because it is the right thing to do. I was telling some Korean friends about a funny story about some college friends stealing a sign, one of those like "Do not park here" signs from a hospital as a joke, and honestly they were appalled. And honestly, I hadn't given it a lot of thought, and I was surprised at how against it they were. And I was like, "Why? It's just a sign." And their answer was, "It's just the wrong thing to do." You don't take signs here because it is the wrong thing to do. It's rude, it's disrespectful, and you shouldn't do it. Just little cultural differences that I've noticed that really make this place better. And honestly, again, a lot of it is just, I love my country, I love America, and that is the reason I feel as though we're not living up to it, in that a lot of Koreans have a lot of ideas about America being like the promised land. They'll say, "Oh, okay, well, we know reality doesn't match up to fantasy," but they still view America as the land of opportunity, as like this shining city on a hill. And I don't know how to tell them, but like there's a lot of aspects to Korea that far outshine the United States. A lot of Koreans have dreams about coming to America. How do I explain to them that like what you have here is, a lot of times a lot better out there? The U.S. is an excellent place to live in if you are middle class or wealthy, but there are a lot of places that they're just bad places. And how do you take someone who's lived in Seoul their whole life and then throw them in, honestly, anywhere in Alabama or Mississippi? I wonder what their reaction would be. Just and it's not just the culture, it's not just the crime, it's the people as well, which segue into health. Say what you will about Koreans' mental health, it's not great. Again, their society isn't perfect. They're at least healthy. And what annoys me after living here for a while is that I'll go back home and I'll experience reverse culture shock. People are really fat in the United States. They're really unhealthy and they're completely deluded. Not just like openly deluded in the sense that there are a lot of videos spreading, fat positivity, and promoting unhealthy body choices, which is straight up not true, and is really harming people. But it's like tacit, almost default acceptance of obesity. What I mean by that is if you see an obese person in the United States, um, it's accepted as normal. Like no one says anything, which um, is a problem. I don't like it when people comment on other people's weights. You should mind your own business. But it's just so common right now that nobody thinks twice about how obese we are. That is the problem that I witness. Because in Korea, everyone's a healthy weight. And it's crazy because I see a lot of new Americans come to Korea every day. And, a lot of times they'll say, wow, the people here are really skinny. No, they're not. They're not skinny. That is a normal weight. We're so used to obesity being the standard that when you see normal human beings for the first time, sometimes people will deride them as being skinny. That's what a normal human being should look like.